I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the playoff basketball podcast. I'm Ben Detrick. With me, as usual,
But actually not always. Not actually as usual.
usually,
Sparingly.
seldomly, Jordan Redaelli.
Hey, what's up? Hello. How's it going? Happy finals. Hi, Andrew.
What's up? Just watching the finals.
Yeah, you know, ho-hum, finals.
The finals. All it sounds to me is that basketball is coming to an end. There's nothing glamorous about
Or
the
is it
finals.
just beginning, the real season?
And does basketball ever end?
Basketball begins with the KBB and then just goes on from there.
I think the KBB is the sort of pinpoint
The marking of the
for
beginning of the celebration.
the cycle of life in the NBA
The
ecosystem.
observance. Right.
When are we getting the KBB?
After the finals. I don't know. I posted 3 already. But officially, not the official KBB.
We are, of course, talking about the Kuo Big Board, the
right.
NBA draft hierarchy as Kuo sees the world.
That's right. Through the lens of my eyes, through my glasses lens, through the lens of my calculator glass, the reflection of my calculator.
As only Kuo
Screen.
sees it. Yeah, we're going to get to that in a couple weeks.
Yeah, there's time for that.
Okay. So before we talk about the finals, which I'm gonna spoiler alert here. Not everyone's happy. There's some grievances and some
Wow.
gripes about the finals.
Wow. That's a
Grumblings.
tease. Are you teasing?
Some grumbling. So you're gonna hear about that.
Stay tuned for grumbling.
There's grousing in a few.
I'm going to be upset in
How
20
come they
minutes.
all start with GR? Griping, grumbling, grousing, grimacing,
Growling.
growling? Does anyone have an answer to that question? It was not.
I
It's
don't
not
have an answer
rhetorical.
for
It was not rhetorical.
No.
Is there
Any
a word? is-
cunning linguists out here that know what I'm
Nice.
talking about?
What are we, 90s rappers now?
I was about to say that's boomer humor.
Oh, we're down for those boomer jokes.
All right. So what were you going to say before you started talking about the finals, whilst saying that you weren't going to talk about them?
I was teasing the fact that we were going to be grumbling and grousing and griping about the finals later.
But
For
first,
now, let's praise some stuff.
let's tempt the sin bin fate.
Ooh. Well, let's see where Kuo goes with this.
Talk about some boxing, boys.
Oh,
Oh, boxing's fine. It's just football and baseball that stinks.
Yeah.
We can talk tennis too.
I don't
Love
even think
tennis.
you're really flirting with the sin bin here. Maybe a wink, but it's not a
Is
full-fledged.
it just baseball and football?
You're kind of just visiting somebody in the sin bin.
Like
You're like
high-fiving
you're like
them?
tapping on the glass and picking up the phone.
You're shaking the glass as they're sitting in the sin bin?
You're just like mildly like swiping right on the sin bin. It's not even a full-fledged encounter. Yeah, let's talk boxing.
This last Saturday, amazing fight, heavyweight. Belts don't mean anything in boxing, but Anthony Joshua, holder of 4 belts, was going to fight this guy, Daryl Miller, who failed his drug test. So they just threw in some guy to fight him named Andy Ruiz. Anthony Joshua was like a cut dude, right? Like
Yeah, he's full like Ivan Drago looking guy.
he's like a cartoon video game version of a boxer, right? Articulate, handsome, ripped, tall.
Reach for days.
Yeah, he's long. He has everything. Like he would be Tim Thomas in the draft, or like a number 1 pick just because they look the part.
Is he British?
He's British.
British.
So the Garden, MSG, the fight was at MSG and it was full of Brits. I had a couple of Brits who wanted to go to this fight. It's too expensive because everyone wanted to go.
British have a decent history of erudite and good-looking boxing champions.
Lennox Lewis.
That was Frank Bruno? Was it Frank Bruno?
That's a writer for the New York Times, isn't it?
There's
Frank
a Bruno.
Bruni. Frank Bruni.
There's a Bruno. There was a Bruno who was a boxer.
I believe you are
yeah.
100% correct.
And Anthony Joshua fits the part. And there's never been a Mexican or a heavyweight champion of Mexican descent.
That surprised me.
Very
I
surprising.
would have assumed at some point, because the sport is so popular in Mexico, that a large Mexican at some point had held one of these belts.
And they're so good at boxing, and they have a distinct style, which is like this unrelenting punching style with no one going down. It's like Mexican fighters are the most fun fighters to watch.
Have they replaced Irish fighters as the quote, like, guys who go to war, like the guys who don't duck punches and just get their face beaten in?
The craziest knockout I've ever seen was Pacquiao knocking out Ricky Hatton. Remember that? He just laid him out. He was like in the air already passed out. But I don't know. My boxing expertise doesn't run that deep.
I think, Ben, you might be leaning on some cartoon Irishmen.
Oh, that was the Notre Dame logo I'm thinking of.
The Fighting Irish.
Yeah, that's the guy. He never won a title. No, I remember.
Guess what? Kangaroos are also not great at boxing.
But I've heard they're good at it.
Kickboxing.
Yeah, they kick, which is always weird to me. Like, they have like little thalidomide arms. I'm not sure why they made them boxing.
Thalidomide.
Yeah.
That's a cool word.
Thalidomide, that's what happened in England in the 70s with birth control, and there was a bunch of babies with defects had little flipper arms. The chemical was thalidomide.
Oh, interesting.
Like little T-Rex things.
Yeah, so it was birth control, and then when women actually gave birth, they had little arms, malformed arms.
So
That's kind of what kangaroos look like. They have these tiny little arms.
and
compared
not
to
a
their
lot
big
of
legs.
those guys became NBA players,
No,
as it turned out.
or boxers.
Doesn't PJ Tucker kind of have T-Rex arms?
I mean, these
Good
things
defender.
are really small. This is depressing. I should have never.
Well, Andy Ruiz also has T-Rex arms, and he knocked out Anthony Joshua, just like destroyed him. Joshua took him down. Andy Ruiz went down, and we were like, oh, it's over. This is going to just end like we thought it would be. I thought it would go, and Ruiz just demolished him. I think he caught him behind the ear and just like messed up his equilibrium and just like dropped him. So whatever, there's upsets all the time, but the reason why this fight was interesting is because optically this was like the classic like aughts Malcolm Gladwell thing. It's just like, oh, the boxer that you think would win didn't win, but why? Like, why did you think that way? And I had the privilege of watching with some boxing nerds, and they were like, Joshua doesn't jab and he's chinny, so this was going to happen. But talking to my boxing friends who don't really go deep into it, it's sort of like people who watch the finals. Like, whatever team wins the last game, they're like, Kwai's got it. He just wants it more. And that's where the narrative kind of went with, like, aside from one or two people that I talked to.
From a cultural standpoint, this was at Madison Square Garden. What's the crowd like when you have like a Mexican heavyweight fighter at the Garden? Because a lot of times when you have a prominent Mexican fighter, they would do those matches in Vegas or maybe LA, but Vegas is the one that I always sort of think of when they.
I've been to LA for a Mexican fight. Yeah.
Does New York have that same kind of audience? Because we went one time to Barclays, and
I saw you
where
there.
I went with you.
Oh wow!
No, I went with you to the Triple G one.
Oh, what do you? Because right,
I love it. Quo's denying that you actually went together. He's like, no, I ran into Ben there.
no, we ran.
I had better seats than you, Ben. I saw you on the stairwell.
It was a
So at the
different
hot
fight
dog
that I ran
stand.
into you. It was that British fighter.
Yeah, and I had better seats.
Oh yeah, you had amazing seats. You're
Yeah,
like, see ya. And
But the Triple G one, there was an obvious amount of people from Kazakhstan.
a stan.
I think it's Kazakhstan, and they have a unique look.
Yes.
And you were walking around, you're like, oh, I can recognize that there are a lot of people from the Kazakhstan is here.
Have we talked about this? I'm not sure if they're Asian or not. Like they're really close to Asia. They kind of look Asian, but we don't call them Asian. And I look at them, I'm like, you're Asian, man. I don't know. Really pale skin. They have my hair. They
You're
kind
an
of
Asian truther when it comes to the.
always. Come on, man.
What about people from Uzbekistan,
You lost me.
Kyrgyzia,
I'm only good for one stand.
Turkmenia?
Turkmenia. But yeah, I mean,
Здравствуйте, как дела? I thought we went over this.
Lives in Greenpoint for like 1 week, and all of a sudden he's fucking native. Get out of here, dude.
I was waiting for the bus to get up here, and I was just like with a bunch of like Polish-looking people.
Well, they were
and they
probably
didn't get on the
Polish.
bus.
They probably weren't just Polish looking. They were probably Polish.
But they didn't get on the bus, and I was like, "Oh, my bad. My prejudice gets ahead of me, man. Holy moly!"
They're just over there eating some pierogies
It's like, you
and
guys
some
are not going to
sausages, and
Greenpoint?
you're jumping to conclusions.
I was like, Anthony Joshua is gonna ruin Ruiz, and then when I saw it, I was like, "Yo,
See, everyone's going on really quick to get back to this fight about how Ruiz beat him. Is anyone talking about the fact that he hit him with an overhand punch in the back of the head, and that was the one that kind of rocked him?
But he went down.
And a lot of he went down, but that's not really a super legal punch. And he also dragged him down, and he hit him, but he definitely dragged him down by the back of the head on at least 2 of 4 knockdowns.
Yeah, it's up to the ref, and he went down. You have to just call a knockdown at that point if he falls to the ground. There was controversy if the ref had ended it early. One of my friends thinks it was an early call. Another one of my friends is always into an early call because people can die. So just like error on the side.
I mean, he looked dazed for 3 rounds. He looked like he wasn't 100% sure what was going on for a few rounds.
And going into it, he was known as a chinny fighter, which means like you can tap him and he is greatly affected by jabs or optically soft punch.
That's kind of a bit of a disadvantage if you're meant to be a heavyweight champion of the world, is that if you get hit, you might go down.
So what's your
But
criteria?
he's still a great fighter.
So for boxing, what are your weaknesses? If I get hit, I fall down.
yeah.
But that's
I'm a
like
boxer.
But that's like NBA players being like, "Well, I don't shoot well," and they're like, "Well, what are you doing as an NBA player?"
Don't.
It's like I do everything else well, dude.
Okay. All right. Point made. Very fair. Ethical. So he's an ethical fighter.
Joshua's awesome, but Ruiz knocked him.
So all you need to
down.
stop Ben Simmons on a fast break is a fat Mexican fighter.
A chinny Ben Simmons.
He's got a Snickers bar, like a banner on his Twitter page. He eats a Snickers bar before he gets into the ring every time.
He likes Snickers, he likes Sprite, and he came out wearing a New York Knicks jersey. Which
Number
respect.
1. Was it
Stoudemire?
Chris Childs? Stoudemire. Did Penny wear one of those? No.
Not sure, but is this the biggest upset in boxing, the heavyweight division, since Buster Douglas, or
That's been
do
mentioned.
people not really care enough about the British fighter who lost to make it even comparable to like Mike Tyson?
It's for sure comparable, and I got into that night. I got into a super fun debate, which was like Tyson wasn't that good, and someone in the room was like, "But Tyson's the best," and it's kind of like what we do on this radio show, being like, "Well, if you take a longer look at it, like Kevin Durant might be better than Michael Jordan," but like to boxing nerds, Mike Tyson isn't even on the level of like LeBron James. He's more like a Kobe Bryant. It's like awesome. People really love him. But when you look at who he fought, he didn't really fight anybody.
I think upset-wise, boxing-wise, yeah, it's up there and maybe even more of a surprise than the Tyson knockout. But, I mean, Mike Tyson was a global superstar at that point, like culturally.
Oh, celebrity-wise,
Is
that's a
Tyson
different-
Allen Iverson?
could be.
But not actually as good as everyone thought he was.
I mean, no one mentions AI's top 5 all time.
But I mean AI, because
he's not.
But I mean AI was
Neither is
awesome.
He's not even top 5 6er of all time.
AI was
Eric,
incredible.
shout out to Eric Snow.
AI was stymied by Larry Brown and assorted haters, which prevented him from ascending to his proper.
Have you ever had
place.
the
And
expression "the proof is in the pudding"? Like where you're just making up like fantastical ideas of who he could have been if it wasn't for Larry.
It's almost
Brown.
like you want me to show you the receipts on the Allen Iverson held back by ineptitude
Well, you
of
bring
the
up
Sixers organization.
a good point because
Something I would never talk about.
Jordan brings up a good point because the problem I have with boxing is like you don't see these guys fight even the best fighter at the time. And like, what are we just making stuff up now to like make them better? Like hypothetically, if they fought this guy, then they would be better. And it's just like, it's a flawed equation, right? Like the transitive property. If someone beats someone else and you beat that someone, then therefore you beat both of them.
And I guess there's also an element of opaqueness to the way that a lot of fights end that are not knockdowns or knockouts or they go to the cards. Because we've all watched boxing, and after a while, you just become accustomed to terrible decisions being part and partial to the watching boxing. You'll watch it and you'll be like, oh, the wrong guy won for reasons that are unclear, and you just move on with it. You're like, maybe they'll rematch then. It's an odd sport where there isn't like a score. There isn't a.
Well, no, there actually is a score.
But you don't really know why.
You know what I'm saying? It's not like you're watching boxing, or excuse me, basketball or football or baseball or any other sport that we talk about a lot. It's much more along the lines of figure skating or diving.
Right, and there's rounds.
So you're saying because it's adjudicated.
Right, and you find out at the end what they think.
It's like now the CompuBox numbers come out, and you're like, oh, he threw more punches at more efficiency. But you never get to see the judge's version of that. You just be like, it's a split decision. You're like, that's so vague. Like we'll never know.
Is the same guy still doing it on HBO after all these years?
HBO has folded their boxing.
No,
There you go, Ben.
Jim Lampley, are you talking?
no, not Lampley, who's the god.
That's right.
The guy that
Jim Gray?
the guy they would cut away to, and like he would give him his card.
Oh, Howard Letterman. It's like, oh,
Okay, Jim.
Yeah. He's
Oh
still.
man, I love that dude.
I mean-
Okay, Jim, I've got a 50. I've got a 42-38 on the cards.
Well, his name was Letterman, which was amazing. But it's like boxing is the home for like boomer, like that's where boomers reside, right? That's where like people who love to be like he wanted it more, or he crumbled under the pressure, or he couldn't stand the bright lights.
Or they love the K Solo song, Letterman.
Can you explain for some of our younger listeners, of which I don't assume we have any, what exactly a boomer is outside of a Australian national basketball
That's right.
player?
I saw his ears perk up when you said boomers, and he's like, "Is this a Joe Ingles chat?"
Are we talking jingles?
Jingles.
It's just the name of the generation before Gen X, which was like popularized in the 90s. Baby boomers, post-war, referred to, and I could be getting this wrong, about like family structure and the suburbs.
Yeah, so it was the greatest generation, right? That was the one who won World War II and flummoxed the Nazis. And their kids were the baby boomers.
Right.
And it was a enormous generation that enjoyed the prosperity that a Caucasian could in America at that
Are you
time.
organizing a straight pride podcast?
But it was very much tied to home ownership. It was a large, huge generation, and the explosion of
Was
the,
it
of
like
the middle class.
like people coming back from the war and being like, "Oh my God, I made it through. Let's like have tons of babies,"
Let's
or was
just
it
bone.
like
Yeah.
a bunch of single women with all these men over in the
Manufacturing.
over in Europe and like the like skeezy dudes that had like weird foot injuries that didn't have to go to war, or like, ooh, look at all these single ladies. I'm gonna knock them all up.
Rosie the Riveter getting what she could.
What's that gross foot injury? It's called like something. It's something where your like foot turns to mush.
Plantar fasciitis.
That's gross too, but
Trench toe?
yeah, I'm thinking of that one.
Like, you wouldn't, yeah, you're over there getting trench toe in the war, then you get sent back. But then there's all these women who are just in the factories all day and thirsty for some loving.
Yeah, you're supposed to buy a car. The idea of like having a family, sending them to school, going to college, and like everybody who's making laws right now.
We won this war so you wouldn't have to go again for
Pretty much.
another 10 years.
Nas is better than Lil Wayne. Oh, you really gonna start a Tupac Jay-Z debate?
But the
I mean,
boomers have not ceded control of the country, which is why the boomers are an odd group, because
no, have they not?
Trump boomer, Hillary boomer,
yeah.
Bernie's a
Yes,
boomer.
yes.
Like a huge percentage of our government is still the boomers, and they're
But boomers are like middle class white people as well, right?
Just the generation before Gen X.
But if you said boomer, and you think, who are you thinking of? You're thinking of like a middle class or suburban white elderly couple at this point.
they have actual memories of when black people couldn't vote.
And one thing that's really, really deeply fucked up,
And they remember because they're
Oh,
physically
alive.
stopping them from going to the polls.
Yeah, they were alive when that was.
yes, I
thing.
remember when I was throwing stones at that
Am I
school
getting
bus
that
as they were trying to desegregate the district. But one thing
Am I
that's
getting that wrong? Before we go on,
no,
is that true?
No, that's the same generation.
Okay.
They were young, but they were around. But one thing that's really, really fucked is that boomers and old people skew white and conservative because people who are of color or have less income generally die younger. It's like one of the more disgusting ways where we look at how conservative old people are, and it's not necessarily because people grow more conservative. It's that like wealthy white people live longer.
It's depressing when you look at it. It's like that's kind of the reason why I got into analytics and metrics in sports.
I thought it was because you're Asian.
Oh yeah, well,
Oh,
let me finish.
okay.
You're right. Okay,
Born
but-
with a tiny arm that had a calculator on it.
Can I finish? You're right. But no.
It's hard to type in my calculator with a violin in the other hand.
Oh, I played violin, and I was a mathlete, and I was a science Olympian, and I played backup point guard on my varsity team. Not well. Woo. But right, so when you look at like the stuff that you're mentioning, if you just look a little bit deeper into studies and numbers and stuff, it gets so depressing and so dark. So I had to switch that entire attention to something that didn't matter, which was sports. Because as soon as you look at socioeconomic stuff starting with like the 1950s, it's like really depressing. You can't really enjoy yourself day to day if you know all that stuff.
What I do enjoy is the way that boomers, and Gen X to some degree, but I feel like it was mostly boomers over the last 10 years or so, have really, leveled their guns at millennials. And sort of been like, we have houses, we have 2 cars in the garage, we went to college, we don't have big debts. Look at you lazy children who want to have, participation trophies and avocado toasts and
No bullying or like.
And in response, the phrase boomer itself has become now an epithet, which is hilarious. It's indicative and represents now not this generation that lived the American dream. Now it's privileged morons who are easily duped, completely clueless, and ruining America.
Yeah, and we should.
Well, also the world, because they're responsible for Brexit.
Absolutely the world, without question. Like you ruin the
Not fighting that.
But you ruin the planet, you ruin the climate, you ruin the economy, you ruined everything. And you're like, the boomers are here, and it's like, oh, the stupidest people on earth have now come, and they are now criticizing us,
Yeah.
the younger generations.
And we shouldn't gloss over that we're Gen X, but the boomers kind of like overshadowed Gen X, where like we kind of are identified as the useless generation. Like we didn't amount to much because we had boomers yelling us down, and we folded like origami.
And we're smaller. Gen X was a tiny group in comparison to the boomers and the millennials. So Gen X just kind of, bedouing it around.
It's like, that's right, I don't work hard enough. I should buy a car. It's like, oh, maybe I should dye my hair blue.
Just slackers. Okay, I'll work in a coffee shop and wear corduroy. That's my generation. Great.
Yeah.
I like Modest Mouse.
No one likes Modest Mouse. Get the fuck out.
Love
I
Modest Mouse.
knew you were gonna say that.
Gen X.
Have
big
you seen
Modest
my
Mouse
glasses?
fans.
Yeah.
I love Modest Mouse and Bill.
So you into like fucking like electric harpsichords and shit as well? Probably.
Sometimes.
Zithers.
Only the best zithers for me.
Cat power.
I love Cat Power.
I love her too.
That's real Gen X talk.
That's right. This is kind of a weird Gen or Boomer aside. Did you guys just realize that Pfizer kind of came up with like a 60% successful cure for Alzheimer's and killed the project because it wasn't profitable? It's wild.
I heard something about that, but then I forgot it.
It just came out a few days ago, but like that was kind of like annoying to hear.
Okay, back to the dong medicine. We know what our bread and butter is. Fix the dicks.
That was the millennial reaction. It was like, but the boner stuff. But
I know, it would be great if Granny recognized you again, but dick pills.
But how do I get my chub on?
Oh, Nana's eating dog food again. On the upshot, this thing could cut glass.
Nothing like helping Grandpa get his door knocker back.
But
I'm glad that we're talking about dicks. That's it.
Okay,
Is that a tease for another finals discussion in
Yeah.
Draymond Green? We'll save that for.
Speaking of dicks, that guy that owns the Warriors really sucks.
We'll get to that later.
Can we get to it sooner?
Yes.
Because we've been
soonish.
talking about dicks for like 10 seconds, and we really need to.
I thought you were enthusiastic about
was.
dicks 10 seconds ago.
I was
Now you're over
enthusiastic-
it.
Yeah.
You know what you need?
Hey man, I'm Gen X. I got no work ethic here. I just want to move on to the next thing.
Clerks. So, in basketball terminology, I feel like we need to use boomer more.
We do.
The interns have been really hard at work on that.
I noticed that when I logged on, which I rarely do, but I saw what the interns are up to, and they were calling Vince Carter a boomer. I think boomer should be appropriated for basketball ideology. Even if it's people who are younger espousing said values, they should be termed as boomer shit.
Vibus are over. Boomers are in. It's all boomers, man.
I think boomers is way more fun to say than vibists.
Okay, so
the
tell me.
boomer
So
era.
explain this boomer thing that the interns came up with. Oh my god, I said boomer in an American accent. Disgusting. I hate myself.
Are you a self-loathing Aussie?
Yes.
It's been his identity since he first trod on American soil. It is I.
The self-loathing
Do you know what happened when I first trod on American soil? This is a true story. I've probably told it before, but I don't care. I stepped out of the doors of JFK. First foot outside the electronic doors that open and close, as doors are wont to do. And this dude goes, "Yo, welcome to New York." And it was Mos Def. I was like, oh, that's a pretty fucking New York welcome. Mos Def, welcome me to New York.
Who's currently exiled from America, right?
Self-imposed?
Is it some
Didn't he
tax
give up
stuff?
his citizenship or something?
Maybe, and he tried to come back, and there's some tax stuff he's got to take care of.
But hold on, but why did Mos Def welcome you? Like, what was he? Was he?
He was walking into the airport, and I was carrying a guitar case. I think he like recognized a fellow musician and
Fellow artists that did you give
Give
him
me a what's up.
Did you give him the artist handshake? That
He's like, do you tickle the strings too?
No, he did not say that. He just said, "Yo, welcome to New York."
that's
Which was
pretty good.
Pretty cool.
But it's honestly
Kinda cool.
now it's kind of cool.
Kind of cool.
Honestly, it's time that this is divulged to you because this was a program at the time to get New York City celebrities lining up outside of the airport to welcome every new person who comes in. So like everyone has a different New York City celebrity that they met when
Oh,
they got
really?
off the plane for the first time.
Who was yours?
Woody Allen is here to welcome you to New York City.
Who was yours? Oh, sorry, they don't
Sun Yee.
they don't welcome people at the bus station coming from upstate.
Coming down to that 86 Sentra, like some Jerry Seinfeld waved at me.
All right, where were we? I really tanked that one.
So, were you a self-loathing Australian because you didn't like being Australian, or you didn't like being you?
No, it's not. I'm not a self-loathing Australian. I just don't like the other ones.
Oh, so you're just a loathing.
But what about the ones you're
Australian.
friends with that you're also in a band with?
I put up with them.
That's a fair answer.
Okay.
Are we talking about Skepta eventually? What's happening?
Is this about pig brains? I feel like we were getting towards the idea of basketball boomers.
I still don't understand the idea of basketball
Stay
boomers.
on that.
Hit me.
We're just changing the word vibist or like old heads to boomers.
So mama mentality, whoever wants it more.
Boomer shit.
Who wants it less.
Boomer shit.
Hustle points.
Boomer shit.
Oh, you never would have got that layup in my day.
Boomer shit.
Boomer shit. If you really want to win, you're on the ground chasing those 50-50 balls.
3-pointers unethical.
Practice.
Boomer shit.
Yeah, all boomer shit. Because
No layups.
Gen X doesn't count because we have no
Gotta
identity.
clap glass if you're gonna make a layup.
You got to touch net. But like millennials don't do much of that stuff, and if they do, they're just like following orders from boomers. You know, it's just like this boomer reverberation that happens in the ether.
What's the real issue with boomer shit is that the established hierarchy of the NBA and the product as it's presented to generally the world, when we're talking about the NBA Finals, the hallowed ground of the NBA, when you look at Mark Jackson and all these guys who are the announcers, and then they cut to Paul Pierce and
Love them.
et cetera, the boomer shit is really infesting the way that basketball is broadcast to the people.
Well, are they underestimating their audience, or are they overestimate, or just estimating their audience? Because I don't believe, like, I saw Tim Legler do a little finals preview, and he was just like, whoever wants it more, and just started naming players from teams. But I'm like, Tim Legler knows so much about basketball. He just thinks his audience doesn't want to hear about it.
The wanting it more is incredibly mystifying. I can only assume it means that whoever is giving you that information doesn't really have a take.
Well, Jeff Van
Like,
Gundy
I've watched the
did
game.
that
I
last
didn't.
night.
I don't really know what happened, but all I can give you is that one team wanted it more.
Look, my honest opinion on this is that it's been the status quo for such a long time, and they're targeting fans that grew up with it is boomer shit. It's fans that grew up in the 90s, and now they're moving on. They're in their 40s, they're in their 50s, following basketball, and it still speaks to them because they're the people that grew up alongside things like ESPN, where younger kids now are less prone to have subscriptions to ESPN.
They
or
did not
to
grow up
ABC.
with Sports Center and Stuart Scott.
Yeah, they
and
don't have
Chris Berman.
They don't have TVs.
But there was literally a guy named Boomer on the first
Yeah,
iteration.
Boomer Esiason. Is that his name?
Boomer Esiason.
Yeah, that's his name, right?
That was a football player for the Jets and Cincinnati Bengals. I'm thinking of some guy I'm blanking on right now, but he does the back call for the home run derby.
Oh, Chris Berman.
Yes,
Boomer.
that's a Boomer.
Old Boomer Bowman. Yeah, but kids these days don't have
Said with
TVs.
absolutely no familiarity at all. He's like, yes, old Boomer Berman.
It's a Stugatz move.
Yeah,
Love that chap.
he's a pretty good guy. Met him once at a Red Lobster. He was eating steak.
Bizarre.
He's a surf and turf fan.
Zig and Zag guy.
Yep. Yeah, but kids don't own fucking TVs. They don't own cable packages. They don't give a shit about ESPN. They're watching things on Reddit or Twitter. So I think that they're just sticking with the audience that pays them to speak about shit in their terms and their terminology.
Totally
Old
reasonable
people.
point. The
Yeah.
people who pay for cable TV and have not cut the cord are on some boomer shit.
Yeah, but it influences the way people talk about the game because, like, I don't really know much about hockey. So when I hear someone being like, "Oh, the Bruins just didn't want as much as the Blues," I'm like, "Really? Okay, that's just all I know." Because I'm not going to look further, you know?
Well, that was a poor decision on their part to want it less.
Maybe the Blues can want it more next time. I don't know.
But also ESPN, when you think about it, their whole identity is appealing to the working class, specifically males. And so there's more likely to be that prevailing boomer mentality in the working class rather than the like college class or the I don't need to go to college, I'm going to be programming or I'm going to like take photos at parties class. Which is the same thing with why their visuals look the way they do. It's like the mechanicals and the cogs and everything. It's because that appeals to people, males who work. And it's specifically designed that way.
But it is interesting, to Quo's point, that someone like a Tim Legler, who's been in locker rooms, Chris Jackson, as a player and a coach, all these guys, Paul Pierce, they stoop to those cliches in a way that validates the opinion that, like, yeah, the Warriors could have won, but Boogie Cousins didn't want to win. He was fine with them losing, and that's why they lost, and he had a poor game, and it cost them big time. And Iguodala wanted to win Game 2, but didn't want to win Game 3, and that's why he only scored 7 points. But I'm saying it's odd that players who've been in those locker rooms and experienced these moments are willing to just boringly say, yeah, that was a desire element there.
It's talking head bullshit, though. It's 24-hour news cycle. You got literally not enough news, and there's not even enough insight to fill 24 hours of a TV program or station. So you have to, I don't know, like what's it called? Bide your time, or like someone's like, it's like keeping somebody on the line during a hostage negotiation. You're just keeping them there, waiting until you can get to the point.
Well,
what are you
also-
looking at?
Well, also, like, I think, like, the numbers for all these things are kind of, for many reasons, like declining, and ad revenue is declining. And I think like the bandwidth for what people perceive as like contrarianism is like it's not effective within their bandwidth delivery. So if you had someone who got up there and being like, "Oh, it doesn't matter who dives on the floor for basketballs." Like yesterday, someone was applauding Steph Curry for diving for that 50-50 ball in the game, and someone said something to the equivalent of like a player who had been eliminated, like they would never do that because they're not here, and that's why Kyrie Irving. It was Bill Simmons, whatever. Bill Simmons was like, Kyrie Irving would never dive for that ball, but Curry did. Therefore, he is the better player who wins the championships. And I'm like, I'm not sure if that's true, but that doesn't really get people on your side, right? Like, yeah, maybe to Jordan's point, like these talking points are kind of an exercise more in psychology than they are in takes.
Part of it is the idea of narratives and stories that we can follow, that anyone can become a part of, that a player didn't want to win enough, and then they dug deep and they were able to conquer their own fears, their opponents, blah, 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 to rise to previously unknown heights. And that's way more interesting than us being like, well, if you look at it, Toronto just missed about 5 shots they normally make, and they lost by 4. Everyone's like, thanks, dick.
Yeah,
I was doing this whole thing with like, you know, Cousins wanted it more because he's never been in the finals, and now you're just saying that the Raptors missed 2 threes?
It's annoying. It's annoying. And then that's my whole contrarianism thing, because people are just like, oh, you're just trying to be difficult. And it's just like, oh, okay,
Well,
right.
they're also, their job is to create drama so people check in the next day. So if the Warriors win the next game, it's like, oh, shit, like the Raptors are really in trouble.
Yeah.
Or like the idea that Durant might be coming back when he's probably not going to see any more time in this series.
Well, just to be clear, I don't have a problem with some of the guys taking that route, because a lot of people think like that, and a lot of people believe in sports and the world in that context. Totally cool if some of the guys who are on TV, ESPN, TNT, ABC, NBC, wherever, who are former players, but I just wish there was a few guys who were the kind of contrarian that, like, say, a Kuo would be. But I wish there was some guys pushing back on that conventional wisdom, like rah-rah jock shit, that boomer shit, as one could call it.
Yeah.
If only
That's all I want.
if only there was some commentators on basketball that were chewing up that 24 hours with dick talk and
Yeah,
TV and Chinese
And Aussiesms.
food.
yeah,
But,
long discussions about
Long-winded discussions.
about Australian snacks, about cheese twirls and twisties.
Burger rings, cheezels, and twisties.
But it all comes from like the source, right? And that's why I think this whole series is a discussion about personnel. And we can talk about like Mark Jackson being like, oh, this is where boys become men. And I'm like, coming from Mark Jackson, that's annoying. But then Stephen A gets on the air and says it. I'm like, go off, Stephen A.
But Stephen A. is
Self-aware and funny.
brilliant.
Yes.
He's really, really, really funny.
Yes,
and
and-
it's a role and it's a character. Mark Jackson's just a blustering sourpuss.
Boomer, as they say.
He's a boomer. I don't even know where Stephen A. Smith comes in. Stephen A.
great.
Smith, he cultivates takes.
Yeah, yeah.
Do people like Mark Jackson? Like, no fan of basketball likes Mark Jackson. Does anybody in the basketball community, the professional basketball community,
You get a weird
like
amount
Mark
of
Jackson?
You get a weird amount of people who are like, I know who the Sixers should hire. Mark Jackson. Every time the Knicks have a vacancy, Mark Jackson comes up. There's a segment of boomer ass fans who really like Mark Jackson because he's old school and he's tough and he was like a Knick and he was a point guard. There's something.
And the elephant in the room, he's a devout Christian who sees the game through that lens.
I need a coach that's kind of a homophobe to really push this thing forward to the next level.
But, like those values would be like working hard, next man up, sort of like Chernobyl, whatever that was. Like you have a duty to every play, to your teammates, to your organization, and you die on your sword, shield. I forget that phrase, but
mound of molten graphite and radioactive lava?
yeah. And
That's definitely what you die on.
and people love that. Meanwhile, Chernobyl. Can we talk about that for a second? It
Yeah.
just ended.
Hit me.
It was awesome.
Don't hit me. Just tell me about it.
Well, I thought there was like I thought it was amazing. I thought the ending ended with kind of a thud, and I said this online. It was kind of like you can't handle the truth, to which someone really shut me down. Was
He
just
died in the car.
So it was like, oh, you're referencing a movie that happened before '96. That doesn't count. I'm like, true story,
Why does that not count?
because the history of the world started in 1996 when Allen Iverson was drafted by the
Basketball began in
76ers.
1996.
Snore.
So I think like
Go ahead.
I think wait no
Excuse me?
yeah
Yeah.
wait I want to know I want to know.
Did you just say Iverson under your breath in a grumble, a grouse, a gripe, or a galumph? Grumph?
Is there a
Is it more
boomer
of a
in our
grumph, yeah.
midst?
Something grumpy.
Yes, I did.
Okay, do you want to keep talking about Chernobyl, or are we going to talk about the finals? What was did you have a Chernobyl take?
That was kind of similar to boomerism. It's like you could there was two different
He's
reactions.
not going to the finals. He's taking this back to boomers.
But the finals is about boomerism, right? Because we can't frame Kawhi Leonard and Steph Curry in any other way than heart.
Okay, all right. So bring the boomer finals talk to Chernobyl. Okay.
So I don't know, Jordan, did you see the whole series?
I did.
Ben, did you see it?
I saw the first episode.
The first episode was the worst episode.
Well, I think the last one was kind of difficult for me personally.
First days were the worst days.
Is that like a 90s rap reference?
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, you're here like bagging out boomers, but you're the most boomerish of almost anyone I know.
Am I?
You're wearing a Mad About You t-shirt, and you keep quoting, was it Jay-Z or Cormega or someone like that?
Rap name Benny Buckets.
At least I wasn't welcomed to New York City by Mos Def, which would have been a dream come
Oh
true.
my God.
I know.
I never thought that would be such a burn. At least I wasn't welcome to New York City by Mos Def.
Which would have been
Woo!
insanely cool.
Holy moly.
It would have been if it were true.
Oh,
Nah, it was true. All right, Chernobyl, radioactive.
Da.
Well, I thought like the last episode was frustrating for me personally because it was like scolding. It was like this happened to Russia because you lie, and they used the word lie completely like the whole time. That's why I was like, you can't handle the truth. It reminded me of Jack Nicholson and
Did they ever get to the bottom of why they were speaking in British accents in Russia? Was that ever discussed or uncovered throughout the series?
well, like we discussed one time when Jordan wasn't around. There's an accompanying podcast that the creator does with somebody and answers all these questions. He was like, how come all these accents, like some of them sound different? They're American. Why'd you choose not to do subtitles? He was like, we just decided to do that. And like the English accents like are kind of like how the actors did it. We just decided not to worry about that. And if you get hung up on that, we're sorry because there's no other way around it because they can't fake a Russian accent.
Can't fake a
either.
Russian accent, and it's all going to sound
Yeah.
the same to the Russian audiences that will be subtitled in Russian
Anyway,
anyway.
Хорошо. Спасибо.
But they put all the writing and text in the show was Russian. So he's explaining something on a board and puts up a Russian placard, but is speaking English. They also did that in a movie called Valkyrie, a Tom Cruise movie about Nazi Germany, where
that
everyone had English and American accents.
Was that movie good?
No.
I
But
started
it
watching
was
it and I
in a
couldn't
way.
remember if it fell under the lesser Tom Cruise movies that Jordan always vouches for. I started watching
Like Collateral,
But that's a
King of
wonderful
Cruise.
movie. Yeah,
I
that's a
couldn't
great movie.
figure out if Valkyrie fell into the all Tom Cruise movies are good sort of umbrella.
It's a fair question.
No, it's there with like Night and Day and Far and Away and some of his true stinkers.
But can I vouch for Valkyrie in a small way? It's amazing that it just plays in line with this whole Scientology thing where like he is a man who changes the course of history that has already been written, but he's trying to rewrite it with him as the main character. I thought it was amazing.
What was the Groundhog Day one?
Edge of Tomorrow
that
is
was
like one of
great.
his best of
That was
Amazing. Come on.
fantastic.
all timer.
Come on, it's a star-making role for Emily Blunt,
Yep.
who ends up being Mary Poppins. Let's get real, man.
What's the
I know, I
sequel
love that
called?
movie.
It's
That movie was
something-
great.
It's something really dumb.
More days.
Yeah, it's like Edge of Tomorrow again.
Wait, there is a sequel?
Yeah, it's coming.
Mary Poppins 2.
Yeah.
Even more
Poppins.
poppin'.
More poppin'. Well, anyway, Chernobyl, simple. I thought it was a pro-Russia movie instead of an anti-Russia movie. I thought it was kind of beautiful and heartbreaking to see the citizens of this country kind of just die at the orders of the people that they trusted. And it's sort of like the way, like we talk about management and ownership in basketball. I don't know, but any sort of kind of like union and management situation, being like, okay, if you have our best interests in mind, we will do what you say. And it might not be the best for me, but we trust in this whole system. And if I fray from the system, the whole thing crumbles.
It was a nice reminder in this current day and age of anti-Russia sentiment that Russia sucks, Russians don't, unless they're in power and government.
I mean, that's fair. You know, like, I really like, was it Flags of Our Fathers? Like, Clint Eastwood did the movie again, but from the Asian side of it, which is interesting.
Well, we also get that with, like, there was a recent interview with Bernie Sanders in the New York Times, and they asked him about being at some events in Central America that were, like, had anti-American sentiments that were expressed. And he was like, well, yeah, America was at the time supporting, you know, right-wing organizations that were carrying out, you know, death squads in that country. So of course,
Like a lineup of death almost.
almost like a death lineup.
Yeah.
But people were mad at Bernie for not sort of universally sticking to the U.S.'s great party line in that same way, where even now we have, it's like when you have teams, you are supposed to circle the wagons again, you know, within your team.
I
This
thought
is
you
your
were
squad.
a Knicks fan.
Exactly, and you're like no, but the Knicks made a mistake here. This draft pick looks bad. Everyone's like, I thought you liked the Knicks.
Yeah.
There's a weird
You'd
sort
being
of
a contrarian.
yeah, I don't know, but the
There's something
nationalism, jingoism, and that idea of like don't criticize our group to others, keep it in house.
Yeah, I mean, it has politics and sports are the same thing, you know, and whatever. Like, it's interesting, kind of talking about a player like Kawhi Leonard, who like is to a degree like we want to frame as like a good worker, right? But he does interesting things, and like he's quiet, and like does the dirty work that we love to talk about, like offensive rebounds, putbacks, steals. Like, people just love how tenacious defensively he is, you know? And like, we're trying so hard to frame him as this next superstar. We haven't really found a lane with him.
Well, let's just talk about the finals then. Now that we're dancing around this topic without being a little more explicit. Fuck. Oh no, without being more explicit. It is now a 2-1 series
Boomer
with
over
Toronto seizing a lead, and although they have home court advantage, it feels like more than a typical 2-1 series in that more or less teams have now held serve in it being 2-1 with the next game of Golden State.
But it's also 2 out of 3 of the games have been road victories, which is somewhat uncommon over the last 5 seasons.
But no one's that thrilled by this series right now.
This is not the series we wanted, man.
What's bugging you, Kuo?
The storylines are kind of like, the ceilings are kind of like a Martell Webster-y. It pushes against a Martell Webster ceiling because
Could we get this to Luol Deng?
I still don't
It
know who
doesn't have-
Martell Webster is. I should Google him sometime.
Minnesota Timberwolves, great.
The
Also,
floor
So
is the ceiling.
I know.
he
All
is
right.
Luol Deng.
I shouldn't have said anything.
But like the most delicious outcome would be to make fun of the Warriors. Like if the Raptors do beat them, that's fun. Giving Kawhi Leonard another championship is not that fun. The Warriors winning is not that fun. Clay going down, like Clay is good, and I know we argue about this all the time here. Him going down just deletes their entire chance.
Yeah, my problem here is that when KD went down, it created a somewhat confusing narrative structure to the finals depending on what happened, but I felt like we were able to dig into that and come up with some furiously hot takes.
I think you guys are full of shit.
Go off.
Go on.
Go off.
You're saying that this is not the finals we want to see? You two have been, well, specifically you, Ben, you've been griping about the Warriors having Kevin Durant and Boogie Cousins for like 3 fucking years, and now they don't, but you want to see
Get 'em,
them with
Jordo.
Durant and Boogie? Like, this is the Warriors team that everybody has wanted. This is, people are like, oh, it's so unfair. They've got Durant, now they've got Boogie Cousins. Everybody's been complaining about that ad nauseum.
As they should be.
Yeah, and so what the fuck is the problem? They're not playing. And they're getting beat. This is what literally everyone has been asking for years.
Well, here's what I was going to say.
Okay.
I think Durant going down was awesome, exactly as what you were saying.
That's really mean, but okay.
No, I'm saying that created
A better story,
a better story.
a consumable story. Like,
And then there was also the tension of when would he come back and what his motivations and what it meant for the team and for the series. Would he come back and be the savior? Would he let them perish without him? Could they win without him? There were all these interesting things. So I'm with you, Jordan. I thought what I'm saying is we had sort of sorted this out. We had figured how we could besmirch the Warriors no matter what happened. That was my focus, and I felt like we successfully organized any outcome would be bad for the Warriors.
and the player who never misses a game is probably done.
And that's my problem, is that Clay went down and screwed everything up.
Screws everything.
And of
up.
course, I like seeing them lose, but seeing a skeleton
How
group...
does Clay going down ruin everything, considering he's not very good, according to you?
Go off, Jordan.
Still better than... maybe he's about the same as Quinn Cook.
Oh, it's weird how all the guards went off last night. Like, all from Toronto. Like, they just had a field day.
Yeah.
Clay just wandering around.
Like, Kyle Lowry had one of the best playoff games of his career.
Danny
And
Green
was that
went
because
off.
he was not being primarily defended by one of the worst defenders in the NBA, Klay Thompson?
Klay Thompson
Could have
is
been.
a lockdown perimeter defender, man. Well,
Monumentally overrated.
well, the minute he goes down, you were just like, oh, it's over. The series is over.
Who did they replace him with? They had no one. This is what we talked about before, though. They don't have depth. They don't have enough shooting. And losing Clay, of course.
They had enough depth. They just have a unnormal amount of injuries. Like, depth
They-
only goes so
For
far.
sure. But I'm saying I would have been happy with them losing or winning with Clay. If they won with Clay, it would have been all right because they wouldn't have had KD. That was a series that we wanted to see.
Four out of their top 6 minutes getters are injured, and only one of them is still playing.
But that's what I'm saying. There's nothing to gain here from a rhetorical standpoint. Like,
And it's fun.
Yeah, but you're only changing your opinion because one apparently bad player got injured.
agreed.
That's
I mean, they can't
curious.
win. They could win without one of KD, Steph, or Clay, but two of them. It's the Raptors are too healthy.
But something that you guys I think are maybe overlooking. Sure, the Raptors won last night, but all starters had 18 plus points or something like that. They shared the wealth, and everybody had very good games. And whether that's because Klay Thompson wasn't defending any of them, probably.
No, Warriors are still in it, man.
I think the Warriors are definitely still in it.
Yeah, that game was a resounding victory. It was not a coin flip game, but Steph Curry's still a great player, and like Boogie looks so bad. Maybe who knows what he's going to look like the rest of the series.
Well, one thing that bums me out is that even if Golden State had won last night without Clay and without KD and with Boogie hobbled, without Looney, with all these injuries, you would have looked at it and said, well, that team isn't better than Toronto.
No, it's terrible.
That they're not a good team,
McKinney is playing.
but they can win games because that's how basketball is.
Oh yeah.
And that's the problem with this finals. It's like nothing's really proven. If Golden State wins without those good players, you're like, okay, well, I know that team isn't better than Toronto, but Curry's really good, and they just kind of got a couple wins, even though that team with Dre, Curry, and Scrubs is probably like a 50-win team and not a title contender.
We have to throw away the data. It's bad data now.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's like that's why it's dissatisfying, because no matter what happens, it's kind of bullshit.
We don't know that much. It's sort of like I even look at the '99 championship that when Duncan beat the Knicks. That was a shortened season, so I kind of side-eye it. I'm just like, that data's really compromised. Same with like when Jordan and Pippen won with a shortened three-point line. I'm like, we have to take those things into consideration. And this series, if we remember, after it's long gone. It's like we have to remember how many players got injured, and it's just like we don't really know that much.
Yeah, I don't really believe in that. Like, it still
Winners
makes
win?
No, the injuries add an asterisk to it because
No, but you just have to remember.
a team's greatness is also defined by its resiliency and
Boomer.
yeah, boom this.
Jordan, drop a boom on them.
No, they built a deep fucking squad, so they have less injuries because people are playing less minutes, except for Kawhi.
Winners win, man.
Winners win.
To be fair, the Warriors won against LeBron James,
Depleted.
a comically depleted team that went 6 games.
We bring that up all the time, though.
No, I'm saying I bring it up all the time. I would be remiss not to say that the Warriors would deserve a similar pass or sort of mention. But the public at large does not.
But they're just watching hockey. They're like, who wanted it more?
But I mean, Golden State still gets credit for that title against a LeBron James Cavaliers team that did not have Kyrie.
They should get credit because what did they do? They won.
But that's what I'm saying. So like,
All these what ifs are fucking.
But if
ridiculous.
Toronto pulls this off, we have to afford them the same kind of, I guess, pass that Golden State got, where it's like, hey, you play who you play. You didn't. They got hurt. You won. You're the title.
Right.
We can't say, well, yeah, but that was the Warriors without KD, without Clay, without Looney. No. Raptors won.
Well, look, Warriors without KD, I think that's done and gone. If he doesn't come back, that's over because he got injured in the second round. It's not like KD went down in the first game and all of a sudden it's completely different. They got through 2 games and a whole other series in order to advance.
Portland Trailblazers.
Yeah, not good. So they're not like, it's not an asterisk team. This team has played their way without KD into the finals. So they're a real team.
But no asterisks. It's just like analysis. If you're a talking head on ESPN or you're a super nerd on the internet, it's half results, half looking at how you got the results. And so when you look at Basketball Reference, it's not like, oh, that BPM is very high. You look at how BPM may or may not be working anymore, which is my whole Clay argument, right? And like we have to look at these series being like, granted, Jordan is 6 for 6 in the finals, but we can look deeper, and that's a whole different conversation. It depends
Right.
on how invested you are.
And when we're talking about those unfun types of analysis, I think, I forget who it was, someone posted them on Twitter earlier, and they were saying that in the 2 games where the Raptors had won, they had scored something like 1.6 points per possession following a Warriors score, which is absurd. It's just absurd. Like,
Yeah.
no one ever does that. They scored something like, and I'm going to be wrong, but it was like 1.06 during the regular season. So they're just making shots out of the half court at like a crazy rate. And that happened in game 1 when Clay was there, game 3 without him. And that's not sustainable. So there's all these things where you can say, well, the Raptors got a call there. They made that shot. A couple bounced in that
Is
they
it
don't
not
normally.
sustainable though? Why is it not sustainable?
Well, this is
Because no one scores at that level.
and
Yeah,
this,
but they just have for 3 games. Why can't they do it for 2 more?
but this is my first team to win 4 was laughed at. But this is what I meant. Like all you have to do is sustain it for 4 games, then you won.
Agreed. You're both right. Like you can Dirk Nowitzki. No, he
The
shot.
most loved player in the NBA.
He earned that love by shooting unsustainably for like 3 weeks.
That's all you got to do, right? And like it happens in the reverse. Famously, John Starks. Like famously, players go cold, and like James Harden, like all he had to do was get to 4, but he couldn't get to 4.
Well, it's just dumb math, right? We're like, oh man, it would have been cool if Dame Lillard had hit his hot streak in the 3rd round versus the 1st, but you can't choose when you get hot.
Also, you might not make it to the 3rd round.
Sure.
Right. And I don't know where we stand on the hot hand anymore. I know it goes back and forth in that community of people who really care about this stuff, but it's almost like the last I read about it was there might be a hot hand, but not in the way we observe it. Because if the clock offers you a finite window of shots, then it's gonna come up heads a bunch of times in a row. The chances of that are high. So you see that and be like, it's heads for a 5th time, and then the game's just over. There's no chance for it to bounce back, right? So it does exist in perception. And it could exist within the framework of a series, a 7-game series as well.
I feel like there are times when you definitely have the ball like releasing from your hand the right way, and you're
No, this is some bullshit.
What I was going to say is there are times when you're warmed up, you're feeling really good, but when you're doing that, you will generally attempt more and harder shots too.
Yeah.
So like it kind of the numbers kind of even out.
what are the
'Cause you
numbers?
throw a heat check up in there, and you're like, oh,
heat checks
sorry.
exist, yes.
I just threw up one that was from like 40 feet out because I've made 3 in a row. It's like, well, now you're 3 of 4 instead of being 3 of 3.
I love players who won't take like buzzer-beating half-court shots in regular season games. It's like, no, that'll drag my entire stat down. And people are like, who cares about numbers? I'm like, my bank account, man.
TJ McConnell is really smart not to do that because he only takes 1 a game.
Yeah, exactly.
He slings in a 1 buzzer beater a week, and it's like
just a 3
It's like you just
attempted.
lost 20% off your percentage, man.
Yeah.
What's the numbers on a hot offhand?
What do you mean?
I mean,
What do you mean by offhand?
Like the
Offhand,
the
like
cold hand.
no, your opposite hand. Your offhand. That's what they call it when you shoot with the hand that is not your primary
what are
shooting
the,
hand.
What are this? What do you
What are the
mean?
numbers like? Do people get hot with their offhand? Like Kyrie Irving and Kawhi Leonard are both remarkable with their left hand.
Oh, they're amphibious.
Amphibious, yes, they exist on both land and water.
I heard. The data for that isn't that interesting. I'm
Why
sure.
not?
Because players can perform with.
But there's also no distance on those shots. So it's really like, are you finishing well? So there could be stats on there are definitely stats on, are you finishing with your offhand at a certain level? So maybe there are times when like I'm finishing well, but it also could mean that you're just getting the basket well.
Right, because you're never shooting a long range shot with your offhand. It's always a type of shot which is around the rim. So that kind of globs onto just like efficiency around that area.
Oh, well, thank you. You did answer my question by not having a spectacularly interesting answer for it. It was, I guess, was
Kind
a
of what we're
boring
all about
question.
here. So in last game, you had an incident occurred where Kyle Lowry went flying into the stands. And
Violently.
Violently, it was a lot
He
of.
wanted it more.
He really wanted that loose ball.
He really threw that caboose at that lady, didn't he?
He put that wagon into drive, and he was then pushed by a man who was sitting in the front row.
What does this man look like?
He was a boomer, like literally a boomer.
Yeah, it
I
was
think, I
literally
think he's
a
like
boomer.
70 years old or 60 years old. He's a boomer.
Billionaire.
He's a boomer, multiple time over billionaire, a minority owner, I believe.
Tough phrase.
He probably owns
But,
Pfizer.
I mean, he's not a minority owner in any way, but
Tough phrase.
Yes, but he owns a minority percentage of the Golden State Warriors, and weirdly, he was not identified quickly, but then it came out that
Isn't that how boomers operate? It's just like Kyle Lowry and that guy who pushed him. I'm like, that guy owns the team, but he just like is a generic white guy that we could just say any name. That's Joe Lacob. Like, yeah, I
I
guess
mean,
so.
look, he was sitting in the front row at a finals game. You knew he had to be
and where
somebody.
tickets were
He
going for
wasn't
like $50K.
Yeah, he's not just some scrub. That was going to come out that dude was
Own the team?
Not just a normal schnook in the front row of a finals game.
But usually owners don't get those seats. They get like behind the backboard because those seats are like super valuable and like for other people. Like the owners usually.
He might have had to pay for it,
Yeah, totally. I mean,
but he
afford
can
them.
because
Yeah.
he's a several time over billionaire
Yeah.
from Sequoia Capital, which is one of the most well-known sort of investment firms in the digital space, et cetera.
Does he do tech?
I'm sure. I mean, there's Apple, Google, Oracle, PayPal,
That's tech.
Yahoo, Instagram,
it sure
WhatsApp.
is.
Techie.
They control, or they've backed companies that control 1.4 trillion in combined stock market value.
wow.
There was actually a New York Times article about this sort of way that the tree, no pun intended with Sequoia, but how wealth sort of stays in the same people in tech generationally. And it, instead of it being this sort of new kind of economy where it's all merit-based and you just kind of blow up, everyone becomes like a member of this same cult, and the same people who've been getting money from the very beginning, who started like 50 years ago are still getting money, and you can trace it all the way down to like someone from Sequoia has also made money off of WhatsApp, who also made money off of this, and it's like the same sort of good old boy network that once you're in that club, then you become an investor member of the club, and money just stays in there, and these guys just get incredibly rich, and then they push Kyle Lowry around.
Yeah. Sometimes you
Let's
get the
talk about
bad boys, though,
Chernobyl
like
now.
Russ Hanneman.
I mean, is there a solution to that? Not to get. I just want to throw that out there. Like, it sounds. I don't like it either. But like, the mayor of Chicago went into like a private investment job. I think he's like stepping down and like going into Wall Street. And I think AOC was just like, not all Democrats are the same. I just don't know, man. What's the solution? How do you break up like the NBA trust?
I just say you outlaw lobbying. Get
I
rid
mean,
of all
that's a
lobbying.
solution. Yeah,
Get rid
for
of
sure.
all campaign finance.
Elizabeth
Like,
Warren stuff.
get rid of corporations having any sort of say in politics. Like, you can't donate.
I'm down for that.
Get rid of like PACs, all that kind of shit.
Yeah, that'll have a good enough immediate result. So, do you guys think Mark Stevens was right to push Kyle Lowry? Or was Kyle Lowry right to?
Fuck no. That was not a. Oh, you like landed on my wife thing. He didn't. He was 2 seats over, and it was a get the fuck out of here push.
He was heated.
He like shoved him, and it was it had menace and intent behind it. Even if it was like a Weasley old white guy push, so it didn't really like people. Like, it was a soft push. It doesn't matter. Like he laid hands on somebody from the opposite team to the one that he owns, and apparently had some choice words for Kyle Lowry for apparently playing basketball against his team. So fuck him, and he should be forced to give up his ownership.
Our man Bethlehem Scholes, Free Darko,
Shout out.
he said, well, if Lowry appeared at that guy's office and shoved him, he'd be arrested.
That's hard though. Right. This is my whole Charles Oakley thing. Like, you can't go into someone's office, MSG, and start a fight and not get kicked out, even though you're a legend. But like, yeah, you can't touch the players, man. Like, you just can't touch the players. It's like if you were at a blackjack table, you can't touch the cards. You know, like, that's just the rules. And sometimes the cards might touch you by accident, but like, yeah, it's just.
It's especially worse when you're an owner because you're a representative of that team, of that organization, and of the league, and like it's really problematic to be then.
And just as a human gesture, like, just make sure he's okay. Like, he's a player. All these guys are mercenaries. Like, he doesn't represent
He nailed that
the
woman in
enemy.
the face with his shoulder, and she was.
He went in
wanted
with
to
intent.
make sure.
I for sure think Kyle Lowry went in with intent, being like, I'm gonna go hard, man. Like, this looks safe. You know, like, I'm gonna fall on a bunch of people. He didn't pull up at all. Hustle. This is why we shouldn't.
I mean, I don't think he went in there with any intention on hurting people.
No.
I also think at the same time that the NBA is the one that puts those seats that close. They're the ones who put the photographers right under the basket, and guys run into them all the time and get hurt. And
Paul George hits the.
They're the ones that
Side
make
of the
the
basket.
NBA are the ones that make the fucking players sit on little pissy chairs so that they can have fans be closer. Like, come on, NBA, like, get your shit together.
Like, that's the rules of the game. Like, if you sit in the front row of an NBA game, there are large athletic men running around, and they might run into you.
And usually it's not a problem. This guy's just a jerk.
Hey, that woman-
Like, it's usually okay.
And the woman that I assume was his wife sitting next to him jumped up because she saw Kyle Lowry and his derriere, his ample derriere, bearing down on her. She got up and got out of the way.
Smart.
Smart. The other thing, though, is smart. She's like, let the woman behind her cop it. The other interesting thing is that she swatted at the ball that was still live since it had bounced in the court. Now, you're not allowed to do that, but also that's her initial just like human reaction, like something's coming toward her, get out of the way or knock it out of the way. Same as like that weird guy who didn't swat the ball out from his wife's face. Remember that
Yeah.
when she got nailed? Her reaction was to swat at the live ball, which would have just ended up in a jump ball, I assume. So you're not allowed to touch the ball. You're not allowed to touch the player.
Remember there was that kid who touched Russell Westbrook this series,
Yeah.
and he was like, "What the hell?" And he turned around in anger and saw it was a kid, and he was like, "Yo, you can't do that." But he was mad when he didn't know who it was, and like, it's true. These fans are way too close, but like, this isn't really a problem. It looks cool when you see international ball and the fans are far away. Like, it doesn't look as cool, and this usually isn't a problem, but it sometimes is. And I think to Jordan's point, yeah, like you may have to like. I think he said today he was very sorry and he's giving money to Kyle Lowry's nonprofit, and
You can't just buy that shit.
It's one of those things that they're going to be like, all right, we're going to make you sell your shares of the team at an enormous profit.
Yeah,
We're sorry.
exactly.
You're going to make your money back tenfold, but you're not going to be an owner anymore.
the Clippers, right? It's like you're gonna have to sell and just make so much money, you won't be.
All right, Donald Sterling, you know that franchise that you bought for $32 million or $1 million back in 1975? You're going to have to sell it for $2.5 billion.
Sorry, buddy, you're gonna have to cash in now. But you know, it's social collateral for a lot of these people, and it's like wanting to be courtside, right? Like that's so valuable to a billionaire, and it does break his heart. Whatever, like I can't relate because I don't have those problems, but I can empathize with him just being like, oh, I was caught up in the moment, I was trying to root for my team, and now I can't be courtside, and everyone's making fun of me, and this is bad.
Now everybody's talking about me online, and they're putting out guillotine gifs, and I don't even know what I'm going to do.
I mean, it's quite interesting to see what Kyle Lowry's response will be, because when he didn't know who it was, like, this fucking guy needs to go. He should never be allowed back into an NBA arena if that's how he thinks he can behave. Is to, like, shove me for absolutely no reason.
Oh no, reason in that
Reason in that
it's the heat of the moment.
What reason? Because he played for the opposite team, he decided to shove him?
That's a reason.
Fine. It's a reason, it's not a good one. It's
No.
not a decent reason.
Yeah, it's not a good reason.
No, but
Okay.
that's why he did
so
it.
that's the understanding of it. It was in the heat of the
He
moment.
wouldn't do that to Dre.
Yeah, but Kyle Lowry has said this guy, because of his behavior, needs to be banned for life or for a long time. It needs a swift punishment to let everyone else know that this is not cool. Like, it's kind of hard to punish a 9-year-old kid, but a 70-year-old person, maybe. And now, if this dude's trying to buy his silence, I guess, or sweeten his apology so that he doesn't get in further trouble. How does
Kyle Lowry makes $30 million a year. Like, you're a billionaire, but Kyle Lowry's pretty okay.
No, but I mean, if he's like, well, I'm going to donate to your charity, and then Kyle Lowry is like, well, let me run that back, then that's kind of problematic, because it's saying you can behave this way if you have money and if you are able to apologize with that money. And
For sure.
That's
For
super
sure.
fucked up. And
But-
I don't think Kyle Lowry will let him get away with that.
But punishments have to fit crimes, and this is a bad thing that he did. But like, let's not overdo it, right?
But let's not underdo it.
That's true
Because
too.
here's the thing. We saw with the Malice in the Palace that we talked about a couple weeks ago, and how the league went draconian on players who threw punches at each other, where Carmelo and Nate Robinson and those guys who got in a brawl just got weeks and months. Dudes have gotten penalized heavily for fighting with each other. And this was all in response to the players getting into it with fans who started that fight by throwing a drink on Ron Artest.
Oh, I'm with Artest on this.
Super was wrong.
But like the league cracked down, the league went nuts, dress code, all this kind of stuff because of the fear that players might go into the stands.
The dude squared up against Jermaine O'Neal, man. What is happening?
But it's like, this is the exact opposite. This is players being worried that fans might punch them, fans might push them. You need to make an example of him. And you're right, it was the heat of the moment. You're right. He has all this money and clout, and he's a part of ownership, blah,
But
blah,
we
blah.
shouldn't take that into account.
I'm sorry. In the context of the relationship between fans and players, the league was very severe about its treatment of players.
it was disgusting.
Suspending them for like a year for fighting with fans. And this is all aggression by a fan towards a player on the biggest stage, Like that guy's got to be like banned for like 2 years from basketball or something. Like,
that's fair, but-
I'm not saying it's got to be for life, but like it can't be for 2 games of the finals.
Agreed. But I want to contradict myself right now. And like the fact that he is an owner is important because he is the league.
So you're saying he should be punished even more?
Perhaps. Like they have to police that
I'm with
within
that.
that
I
corporation.
definitely 100% believe that because he's not just a fan at that point.
but
He might
remember-
be sitting there as a fan, but he's not.
But remember, he's Commissioner Gordon, right? Like he's the one who creates the rules. So like this is really complicated. And I'm with you. Like 2 years, yeah. Don't let him see Curry again in his prime.
But I actually kind of agree. Like you should try to make him sell his share in the team.
My
I think you're right.
original reaction was like
you-
he's got to go, and the Warriors organization should politely ask him to go. Like a lot of the progressive nature of that organization and what they talk about as their culture, and especially Steve Kerr, they can't stand for that kind of shit. They just can't.
So this is going to be an annoying question. I have a million annoying questions always. But so Malice in the Palace, we all agree that was egregious. Like the way the league responded to that was horrible, right? Like we just interpreted that thing wrong. It was the wrong time period. We weren't ready to really have nuance with this whole thing. Shouldn't we have nuance now? Like, shouldn't we learn from that as opposed to being like, oh, if you're going to do that, then we have to do this? Like, when does that end?
Right. You don't say just because we convicted you of marijuana possession in 1985, today we shouldn't legalize it.
Right.
Very true. My heart, however, does not go out
No.
to a billionaire who pushed a player and is a partial owner. Fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Like, if anyone is supposed to, if anyone is, there's no one worse to do that than an owner.
Yeah, you can't touch the players.
If you're a
man.
fan who bought that ticket and you're too into it, if you're Drake, actually, but not nearly as bad if it's Drake. An owner, you
Should know
own
better.
players, you control players' lives, you make decisions that impact players generationally. You can't touch them.
Yeah, if Kyle Lowry had turned around and bitch slapped that guy, slapped him upside the head, be like
Suspended
even if it
all
was just a
series.
like, don't touch me. Are you kidding? Like, fuck out of here. If he had responded in kind,
Yeah.
the fact that he like touched an owner would be huge.
Agreed.
I wish he'd slapped him silly just to see
God.
what would have happened.
And that's the crazy thing with like I watched the Ron Artest documentary on Showtime recently, which is fantastic, and it's essentially the second half of it is a 30 for 30 about Malice at the Palace and what led up to that and how he dealt with it. And it really highlights how egregious that those suspensions were. I mean, Ron Artest, hard foul, 20 seconds left in the game, that's fine. He laid down on the scorer's bench as a result of advice from his psychiatrist. Like, if something gets heated, go and like relax, meditate somewhere. And he found a nice place to lay down, a soft cushion.
He's just the best.
He also did not want it with Ben Wallace.
No one does.
And, but he'd been working on this shit for years to get to a place where he would just lay down. And through circumstance, whatever, some dickhead throws a cup very casually without thinking about it. And he goes into the stands, which is maybe an overreaction.
Totally an overreaction. Yes.
I would say definitely an overreaction, but maybe an understandable overreaction.
Yes, I would.
Shout out to Steven Jackson.
Yeah, I didn't think going to the stands was that bad when somebody threw a drink in his face. Like, that's fucking crazy. Like, someone threw a drink in my face, I wouldn't probably. Well, someone has thrown a drink in my face, and I reacted like Ron Artest.
But his psychiatrist would
Shout out
probably be
to
like,
Tim for putting a sleeper hold on the other dude.
"Oh, he's your Steven Jackson,
Oh, Tim, absolutely my Steven Jackson.
a fellow Aussie,
fellow
that we
Aussie.
love."
And now people are like, oh, well, the guy just threw a cup. Not exactly true, because when Ron Artest went after the wrong person, the guy that threw the cup had him in a headlock and punched him in the side of the head 3 times. Ron Artest finally comes back onto the court. Another fan approaches him, and he just nails that dude straight away. Why wouldn't you? Some random-ass motherfucker in the stands just had you in a headlock with 3 other people, and they punched you in the face repeatedly. Somebody else wearing a Pistons jersey is on the floor. You hit them. I'm still dumbfounded to this day that although the guy with the cup got assault charges, an entire season because you were essentially defending yourself physically, defending your pride and your self-respect. And that's why David Stern is such an asshole, is because he didn't have his players back. I don't care about the fucking product. Your players are the product. So you have to protect them first and foremost.
I mean, we talked about the Malice in the Palace before, and like, yeah, I to backtrack like 5 minutes, and I agree with all that. Like, I don't think those players should have gone into the crowd. I think the security at the arena should have taken care of it. I don't blame those guys for going into the crowd. We kind of celebrate them as folk heroes now for doing it. Like, our perception changes about that, right? Like, we look back on that and we're just like, yeah, they're the best. You know, like, give them podcasts. Like, they became stars because of maybe the worst mistake they've ever made in their lives. And Steven Jackson, he's all over ESPN, and he's great. And we shouldn't, I don't know why we have to bring that up when we talk about, I know why we do bring it up, but I don't know if it's equatable to what happened last night. Like, we could bring up Drake easier, giving Nick Nurse, kink fan Nick Nurse, a back rub really quick. But, like, that's more similar to what happened last night than the Malice in the Palace, which was basically just assault.
Well, no, the difference is Drake is a somewhat ancillary or...
He's part of the organization.
He's part of the team, part of the organization. And he touched a coach who he is friendly with, familiar with, and part of the same organization. What's his name? Mark Stevens touched a player of whom he has no familiarity with in an aggressive way. There's a big difference between...
But that's the nuance we need, right?
Well, it's not really nuance. It's
well, you're separating off-white from white.
No, I'm separating, like, black from white. Like, it was a friendly gesture to someone he knew. It's like he gave someone, you're equating someone giving a high five to somebody slapping him in the face.
I mean,
Who you don't know.
if a member of Golden State flew into the crowd and Drake was there, do I think Drake would have pushed that guy? No.
No, not in that way.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think Drake would have done that.
But, you know, Drake, as we know, it's just like a playful back and forth between these players. So he's friendly with these players. So he's a part of that kind of community. But the ownership is so separated from the players that sometimes I'm just like, it's tough, man.
But
like,
we've also heard players this season, last season, increasingly say that they don't feel that safe. Now, whether or not that's hyperbolic, because obviously there are not many incidents where there's been a player who's been actually hurt by a fan or had an incident where they got into it in a way that was more than verbal. But we've had players expressing this idea that they don't feel safe, that there are things that are threatening to them, there are things that are insulting to them, demeaning, and we've heard more about that of late. And this might be a tipping point because this falls into the same pattern, but it actually is physical. And where's the next leap from that, right? To like, it goes from like a push away to a punch. And those are two different things for sure. But if we're talking about the slippery slope of fans increasingly hostile towards players, if it goes from yelling to pushing to punching,
yeah,
if you're the league, you're like, we have to nip this in the bud.
And when they say that they don't feel safe, I don't necessarily think that they're frightened of what might happen from some like douchebag fan in the stands, like hurting them. But they want to feel safe and protected. I think would be more apt from verbal abuse, from the disrespect from somebody else that they wouldn't put up with in their normal lives, and no one necessarily
and that
would
the
or
league
should.
and the officials and the teams are not protecting them.
Yes, they do not have their back, and I'm sure that's a particular point of concern for Adam Silver, who seems to pride himself on having their back, and that's why I think that he will do the right thing in this scenario.
And an interesting thing moving forward, like Gen Z thinking much differently than we do, talking about different kinds of aggressions you can bestow upon another human being. Like, how does the NBA start policing NBA Twitter? which like comes at these players really hard too. And I think it's kind of funny to us being older thinking about that, but to Gen Z, this is really real. Like
Online bullying
for
of
sure.
NBA players.
Yeah, they're just like, this is like not fair to this other human being, and their space is being interrupted.
Right, because younger people also have a much different relationship with social media that prior generations did, where you can say, oh, we'll just ignore Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff. And if you're a Gen Z kid, you're like, but that's like telling me to ignore my phone.
Yeah.
It's like telling me like not to pick up my phone or like it's.
Or just like stop hanging out with my friends. Like it's a part of their life. It's already ingrained. It's not like an addition to our lives like we've experienced. Like it's just a part of their DNA at this point.
We're covering a V-Files event, and the whole theme of this, and it's kind of like a sort of cutting-edge New York City-based clothing store. They do some of their own clothing. They work with other kind of up-and-coming fashion brands, but it's pretty avant-garde. And they had a party that I was covering for the style section, and people weren't really drinking. People weren't really dancing too much. On stage, there was a photo shoot going on where you could hear like the pumped over the speakers with the music that a DJ was playing. I forget who was DJing and whatever, Comethazine or whatever. I forget, whatever. Anyway, but every kid there was probably early 20s, or the majority, and they had their phones in their hand the entire time. And this isn't a get off your phones kids thing. It was that there was a different relationship with them broadcasting themselves on stories or streaming. I mean, half the people were doing that for most of the time, either taking shots of themselves or just talking into their phones or networking with someone on their phones. And it's kind of that point. If you're that age, that's your relationship with this device, which translates to this is your relationship with the world at large. And if all of a sudden you've been living like this your whole life, and now all of a sudden it's filled with people being like, you suck, like you're a bum, you're a bust.
I smell a Black Mirror episode in here.
Oh, intolerable.
Ugh.
But I mean, it's going to be a real thing, and I think the NBA is going to have to deal with that, especially with the way Durant kind of deals with social media. And I agree with all you guys are saying about this situation, and I think Silver is rightful to do anything he wants in this case. But this opens up an interesting can of worms moving forward with social media and the way the NBA chooses to have their players interact with fans.
Well, let's talk about the king of the non-boomers. At this point, it's Kyrie Irving. We've discussed him many times, and the way that he is an affront to that particular way of thinking, to boomerism, boomers. Kyrie is so millennial in so many ways that are both
Third eye.
endearing and
Frustrating,
infuriating,
baffling, entertaining,
all those
lovable. Yeah.
He's become a player that a few years ago I didn't really like him. Now I love Kyrie.
He's changed. He's changed. He's a different player on and off the court. He's awesome.
I love how he infuriates people.
I remember we were back in the old Cookies days. We were like, "Is Kyle Lowry good?" And we went through his numbers. Like,
You're talking about Kyrie.
Oh yeah, Kyrie Irving. Is he
Kyrie
good?
Lowry.
Is he good? Like, and we went through his numbers. Like, yeah, he might not be a good defender. He may have weaknesses in efficiency. And in those 3 or 4 years, he's changed as a player, changed as a businessman, and changed as a social presence that we're just like, oh, he's the best. Like, he's an asset.
He was one of those guys who was so otherworldly talented that it was very frustrating to see him take bad shots. He seemed to have a very low basketball IQ, or at least he didn't know how to balance having the ability to make every shot with the idea that some shots are better than others. And he is incredibly gifted and always was, like arguably the best ball handler in the history of organized basketball.
It's pretty, man.
Like,
watching him play is pretty.
And as Jordan said, his ability to finish with both hands around the basket, the guy's just a fucking magician.
It's fun.
And he's increasingly become really, really, really good. And this year with Boston, they didn't necessarily play great with him. And I think that fed into the idea that he was somewhat of a disappointment and it's not that big a deal if he loses. Well, they are wrong because Kyrie is exceptionally good and is by far the best player on Boston.
And the boomerism comes in where it's just like he's a cancer because he has all these weird ideas. His teammates might not like him. He fights with the fans. He won't tell the media what he's actually thinking. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? He holds the Boston franchise hostage
He
by not
shot
telling them.
poorly in the playoffs, indicating that he didn't really want to win.
It looked like he was checked out and didn't care as much. And I'm like, that's your best player, man.
Well, it's also pretty understandable if everyone hates you where you are.
But we're trying to figure out why the hate happens, right? And like you're getting at something that the elephant in the room, the
Build
region.
around Hayward.
Hayward, man,
The
like,
key to Boston.
he is never brought up in any discussion with Kyrie Irving and Boston. People just bring up Hayward right away. He's the reason why that team wasn't good. Tatum as well.
Also, that team was good. They just were not a good
Yes,
matchup
they weren't a
against
championship
Milwaukee.
team, right?
And
They were good.
Kyrie himself was the one who brought up the relationship that Hayward has with Boston or that Boston has with Hayward.
Which was really funny.
It was fucking shade mastery 101. It's like, oh, why don't you talk?
King of the city.
Yeah. Oh, why don't you talk to Gordo over here? He's got 4 points and 2 rebounds over the last 5 games, and the keys to the fucking city because
Oh,
he's,
max contract, very cool.
yeah.
It was literally like, yeah, Gordon just had a huge game, dropped 12 and 4. There he is.
But it was
King
also
of the bean.
It's also was his way of saying like, here's the keys to the car, Gordo. I'm not driving this shit no more. I'm out of here.
And the boomerism against like Kyrie happening now, which is just like good riddance, like let him ruin some other team. And let's say hypothetically he goes to New York or Brooklyn, like, and they don't win a championship with him. It's gonna be like, see, he's a cancer. I'm like, well, what else did they do? Because as we're seeing in these playoffs, in these finals, like you can get Kawhi, you can have Steph, Durant, but if you don't build around Simmons and Embiid, like you're weak. So like, of course, every team wants a Kyrie. It's how they build around it. But the Boomers are just waiting, being like, there's a chance he won't win another championship, and they're all over it.
Well, the saga of Kyrie is really interesting because not only did he go from the Cavs and winning a title to the Cavs' main rival, which was Boston, he was also dealt in exchange for one of the Brooklyn picks that Boston got in the infamously lopsided trade.
Colin Sexton, it became, right?
Exactly. So now the rumors are that Kyrie wants to come and play in Brooklyn.
Oh, the
So-
best.
Not only did Billy King have the longest view in the room
So
and
long.
planted the seeds for an orchard when he made that brilliant trade,
Brilliant trade.
which rebuilt.
Dusted Ainge, man.
He unselfishly sacrificed himself so that the Nets could thrive 6 years later. But there is a obvious amount of delicious irony of him going to the Nets, who won the trade. And all of a sudden, we had him yesterday up on 72nd Street, walking into a townhouse, carrying his bags.
Big smile.
Out and grinning. out in Jersey, putting up Instagram stories saying, like, home is where the heart is and where you stay. And also, the Brooklyn Nets are from New Jersey, where Kyrie grew up.
And the rumor is they're going to max out D'Angelo Russell and Kyrie and run with those guys, Karis LeVert and Jared Allen, which is super exciting. And they can also trade a bunch of guys for Anthony Davis. Like, we're looking at a situation in Brooklyn, and they have the right organizational talent up in management that could pull off something really fun this summer in a month.
Yeah, in a second.
Yeah.
One thing that I've heard from some people who've grown fond of the Nets, the small segment of people who are now reveling in their, ground floor Nets fandom.
I don't blame them.
Are like, well, I don't really want to trade for Anthony Davis.
No.
Let's build around these guys. It's like, no. That's why you do what they did.
Yes.
When you start playing the margins and you start finding those guys like Kuruks and finding the Joe Harrises, it's so you can trade them for a superstar.
Yes.
And they're in great shape because with LeVert with Dinwiddie, with Russell. These are all reclamation projects for the most part that they were able to find. Like LeVert dropped in the draft because of an injury. Russell didn't have leadership qualities that Magic Johnson recognized.
Jared Allen, ethical and old-fashioned, so he dropped.
But all these guys that they found outside of the top of the draft, outside of free agency, and they're now in position to bundle them together. And like that's of course what you do.
AD is too good.
You have to trade for Anthony Davis. You have to sign Kyrie Irving. And if you do those things and you still keep a couple of your guys, you're a championship contender.
And I've been online being like, I kind of don't want the Knicks to trade for AD and Kyrie with all these young guys. I just don't trust the Knicks to do anything with them. I trust the Nets to do everything with them. And I think that's a better situation for everyone involved. The Knicks just can't handle it. Like, they don't know what they're doing.
Well, the scariness of a team that is competent, that has vision, good management,
And good players.
good player development, and in the
city.
biggest market. Man,
That's scary. That's scary.
Man, if the Nets are able to pull off an Anthony Davis and a Kyrie, that team is a juggernaut.
Will they finally reboot their fucking uniforms?
Oh, God, please
Will
call us. New Jersey,
like that's got to
Brooklyn,
happen,
yeah.
right? If it's a fresh start and you've got AD and Kyrie, can we get a good uniform?
Can we add one color?
The gold. I'm telling you, they look like the Spurs. Add gold.
You guys don't like that Eric Hayes kind of Cosby sweater vibe?
That's cool, but I think they
It's not
should.
bad.
They got to lean into the whole bigginess of it all. And I think I've said this before. You know the Biggie T-shirts where it's like a black and white photo of him, but then the crown is gold. They're all over Brooklyn.
What if it was a chain
That's-
and their numbers hung off like medallions?
I would like that. Like
I mean, I'd buy one.
I used to have this sweater. It was a Mr. T one, so it was a print. So
Oh,
it was
that's
printed.
nice.
This is when I was really little. I was like 6 years old, and it had the denim vest, and then chains.
The chains, the
chains
signature
built into
chains.
it, and like a tuft of chest hair.
You
But
mean
it was
like applied?
yes,
Not
applied.
printed.
Applied, and the arms were padded with muscles.
Where is this thing? It's worth like $2,000.
It probably would be. I remember it's my family bought a Toyota 4Runner. It was part of a promotion. They gave me this. So and I had a Mr. T mask. So I like walked around town with like these
Looking
huge,
amazing.
huge
Just
arms, jacked 6-year-old Mr. T. Somewhat problematic, but it was
a different time.
1986.
Yeah. Can you? I want.
You
I
weren't.
want
It was impossible to be racist back then, which is like one of the keys to the '80s. There was no racism.
right.
But I'm with you on the Coogee sleeves. Just make that the permanent one, and I think those uniforms are cool. That little Coogee thing around the neck, around the sleeves, maybe the piping on the side of the shorts. Like that's
Also
good. Good
ties
enough.
in, says, as we know, Kyrie, like Coogee, was born in Australia.
I love it.
And that's the perfect way to end a perfect podcast.
I was worried up until then, but you
No,
wanted
the-
it more.
The boomer brought home the boomer episode.
Cheers.
Cookies.
Cookies.